Okay, let's step inside the courtroom for a second. Imagine the atmosphere. You can almost feel the tension, right? The weight of every single word, every piece of evidence shown.
It's incredibly high stakes. I mean, these aren't just abstract legal arguments. People's reputations, their entire lives, are literally on the line.
Exactly. And when someone takes that stand, swears that oath, everything about them, their story, their past, how believable they seem, it's all just laid bare, ready to be picked apart.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other side, they're not just passively listening. They are actively looking, uh, probing for any tiny crack, any inconsistency, anything that doesn't quite line up.
Anything they can use to chip away at that person's credibility and the story they're telling, it really becomes this fundamental fight over what the jury is going to accept as the truth.
Precisely.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really immersing ourselves in the very latest from a trial that's getting a lot of attention, the ongoing case involving Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah. We've been looking closely at the reports coming straight out of the courtroom, focusing on, the witness testimony, the legal back and forth, even those little procedural moments that can actually shape everything.
Our mission here, our goal for this deep dive, is really to help you make sense of all these moving parts. We want to unpack the strategies, from both the prosecution and the defense. How are they using witness testimony?
Specifically, witnesses like Brianna Bongolan and the woman known as Jane Doe. We'll get into what they said, how the lawyers challenged them, and also look at things like debates over evidence, even how the defendant himself is behaving in court.
And as we go through this, you'll notice this strong undercurrent. It's the critical importance of precision, of clarity.
It's not just what is said, but how it's said, right?
Right.
How it's presented, how it's challenged by the other side, how the evidence actually supports it or doesn't, even how someone acts in court.
Yes. The source material really emphasizes this need to be precise with the words spoken, because in that environment, every single phrase can be twisted, analyzed, used to build your case or, tear down the other sides. So let's dive into this intense process.
Okay, let's jump right into day 16.
Okay.
This was really a key day, kind of setting the groundwork with testimony that got put under a microscope later on.
Right, and the day really started with someone essential for validating a major piece of evidence for the prosecution. Frank Piazza, he's a digital forensic expert.
His job was basically to authenticate that 2016 hotel surveillance video, the one allegedly showing Mr. Combs assaulting Cassie Ventura.
So, super important piece of footage.
Absolutely crucial. And his testimony, well, pretty technical, was all about laying that foundation. He explained how he got the video files, confirmed they were authentic, that they hadn't been altered or tampered with in any way.
And the timestamps were correct. The files were complete.
Exactly, all those technical details. He needed to assure the jury that this hard evidence, this video, is reliable, that it's real and hasn't been manipulated. Piazza's testimony provided that stamp of technical approval.
Makes perfect sense. You can't build a case on shaky evidence. So, okay, the video's credibility is established, then the prosecution shifts gears, right? Trying to bring in the human element.
Yeah, after Piazza, they called Brianna Bongolan. She was described as a close friend of Cassie Ventura during that time, during the relationship with Mr. Combs.
Okay, so she's testifying as someone who was there, saw things firsthand.
Pretty much. As a bystander, a friend. Her testimony was meant to give the jury a sense of Cassie's emotional state, her physical condition, from someone who knew her well, trying to support that prosecution narrative of psychological control and abuse through these personal observations.
And didn't she also make a really serious allegation herself about being dangled over a balcony?
Yes, she did. A 17-story balcony,
Okay.
a truly terrifying personal account. And if the jury believes that, it obviously speaks volumes about potential patterns of extreme behavior.
Wow. Okay, so naturally the defense went after that testimony hard.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That became the prime target during cross-examination, especially that balcony allegation.
The source had a pretty vivid description for it. Said the defense attorney, Nicole Westmoreland, pressed Mrs. Bunglin harder than a panini. Gives you a real sense of the pressure.
Chuckles lightly. It does paint a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it reflects the defense's goal perfectly. They needed to try and dismantle her credibility bit by bit in the jury's eyes.
Because if they doubt her, they might doubt other parts of the prosecution's case that rely on her story.
Exactly. So they're highlighting any inconsistency they can find, any possible exaggeration, any hint of bias, anything to make the jury think, maybe I can't fully trust what she's saying.
And the source mentioned that Mrs. Bongolan, who had immunity, often answered with things like, I don't know, I don't remember, I don't recall, during this intense questioning.
Right. And while memory, especially under stress about past events, isn't perfect, the defense can definitely frame those kinds of answers as being evasive, or at least uncertain. It undermines that sense of clarity you need from a witness.
Yeah, they want the jury thinking she's either hiding something or just doesn't really know.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Westmoreland's strategy seemed to involve suggesting Bongolan wasn't being entirely genuine. The defense hinted she might be, amplifying her involvement or maybe enjoying the spotlight a bit too much in this big case.
And they brought up her own lawsuit against Diddy, right? The $10 million one.
They did, directly suggesting her testimony might be motivated by trying to get a big chunk of Diddy's funds. It's a classic defense move: question the witness's motive. Is it about truth or is it about money?
Implying her story might be shaped by personal gain.
Precisely. They want that seed of doubt planted in the jury's mind. Maybe her memory isn't objective. Maybe it's colored by that potential payout.
So let's get into the specifics they hit her with during cross-examination. What did the source detail?
Well, they directly asked about drug use with Cassie Ventura. The question was pointed. You're still doing drugs with Cassie on May 31st, 2016, right?
Right.
And she confirmed that.
Okay. What else? Did they challenge her being scared?
Yeah, they questioned her claim of being afraid after alleged threats. Asked something like, you weren't scared to continue dealing with Cassie?
Yeah.
Her answer, I guess not. Well, that gives the defense something to work with.
Suggesting her actions didn't match the fear she described.
Right. And they brought up her going to one of Mr. Combs' concerts in October 2016.
Yeah.
Asked if she attended. She said yes, but couldn't recall the exact date.
The implication being?
If you were genuinely terrified of this man, if he allegedly injured you just weeks before, why would you voluntarily show up at his concert? It creates this apparent contradiction for the jury to puzzle over.
Makes sense. It's about behavior versus claimed emotional state. Did they dig into her lawsuit details?
Oh, deeply. Questioned her about firing her first lawyer, Mr. Tyrone, hiring a new one, the process of drafting and reviewing her own lawsuit against Mr. Combs.
And this is where the exact wording became really critical, wasn't it? Especially around the sexual assault allegations.
Absolutely. The defense attorney's phrasing was incredibly direct. She asked, isn't it true that your lawyer, Mr. Tyrone, alleged for the first time SASA, and although you knew it was untrue, you began repeating it?
Wow, that's blunt. Accusing her of basically adopting a lie told by her lawyer.
Exactly. Suggesting the SA claim didn't originate from her actual experience, but was introduced by the lawyer, and she just went along with it, knowing it wasn't true. It's a direct attack on the core of a very serious claim.
And they kept pushing on that point.
They did. Followed up with questions like, you kept repeating the lie about him grabbing your breast. And then even more pointedly, you continued accusing Mr. Combs of SAU, even though you knew it was not true.
So explicitly calling her a liar about the SA claim right there in court, this really goes to that theme of clarity or the lack of it. The defense is trying to show her words aren't a clear reflection of truth.
Precisely. They were trying to box her in on the specifics. They asked if she'd ever claimed Combs squeezed her breast so hard it left bruises, maybe something from an earlier demand letter via her first lawyer. She denied saying that.
So scrutinizing every detail ever associated with her claim, even if it wasn't directly from her testimony.
Right. And they also kept asking why she didn't report these things. Did you call the police? Did you go to urgent care? Did you tell your chiropractor what supposedly happened?
And her answer for not telling the chiropractor?
Simply, I was scared.
Which is an explanation, but the defense uses those questions to suggest maybe the incidents weren't as severe as claimed, or perhaps didn't happen that way. If it was that bad, wouldn't you tell someone official?
That's the doubt they want to raise.
Hmm.
And then came a really major challenge, the timeline and location of the alleged balcony incident itself.
This was the part about him potentially being in two places at once.
Exactly. The defense presented evidence suggesting Mr. Combs was on the East Coast around the time Bongolan claimed the incident happened in L.A. in September 2016. They mentioned Bad Boy reunion tour dates, a concert in Newark, New Jersey on September 25th.
Okay.
And then a hotel receipt for someone named Frank Black at the Trump International Hotel, presumably near NYC. That included September 26th.
Okay.
The clear implication: Combs was in the NYNJ area, not L.A., on the date she claims he dangled her off a balcony there.
That's a potentially huge contradiction based on records. How did she respond when they confronted her with that?
Well, the defense lawyer asked directly, you agree one person can't be in two places at the same time?
And her answer?
According to the source, she replied, hard to say. When pressed again after a sidebar, she just said, my answer is still the same.
Hard to say. That's an interesting response to a basic law of physics.
It certainly avoids directly conceding the point the defense is making with their timeline evidence. It leaves her testimony standing, but potentially clashing with documented facts,
Hmm.
which is exactly the kind of unclarity the defense wants the jury thinking about.
Okay. Did they use any other evidence against her? Text messages?
Yes, they brought up texts between Bongolan and Cassie Ventura, specifically mentioned reading one sent after the alleged balcony incident where Bongolan asked Combs if he wants a T-shirt.
Asking the guy who supposedly just dangled you over a balcony if he wants a T-shirt.
That's the juxtaposition the defense wants the jury to see. They highlighted it. You are alleging that Mr. Combs, just 2 weeks prior to this, hung you over a balcony, threw you into furniture, you sustained serious injuries, and now you're asking him if he wants a T-shirt. It's meant to show her behavior seems inconsistent with the trauma she described.
What was her explanation for the T-shirt text?
She said they were trying to be cool and mentioned a FaceTime call. But the defense kept pressing, asking, wasn't it true she kept seeing them because Combs didn't actually cause those injuries?
How does she handle that?
She replied, part of that statement is true and part I can't agree with you. Trying to clarify, it seems, that yes, she saw them, but no, it wasn't because she wasn't injured. But you see how the defense forces these tight corners.
Yeah, making her parse her words so carefully. It really shows how that cross-examination is a battle over the precision of every single statement.
Absolutely. A fight to create unclarity versus maintaining a clear narrative.
Okay, so after that absolute grilling on cross, the prosecution gets their chance on redirect. The source mentioned expecting them to try and fix this mess.
Redirect is vital. It's their chance to sort of repair the damage, clarify things the defense might have twisted, bolster the witness's credibility again, and refocus the jury on the core points they want to make through this witness.
So what did they ask her? Did they address the inconsistencies?
They asked if she'd reviewed notes from her government interview. She said no. And importantly, they asked if she gave Cassie permission to put her name in her complaint.
Addressing potential issues stemming from Cassie's lawsuit.
Right. Bongolan explained they only had one conversation before Cassie filed. Cassie asked if she could mention her regarding the balcony incident, but Bongolan said she didn't know exactly what details would be included.
And then she admitted some details in Cassie's lawsuit were wrong.
Yes, she testified that after it was filed, she told Cassie that some details in the lawsuit about the balcony incident were incorrect.
That seems like a significant admission of prior inaccuracies, even if it wasn't her direct statement.
It does acknowledge discrepancies in information attributed to her, but then the prosecution brought her back to the present to her testimony that day, and she made a key statement that her testimony today was her best recollection.
The best recollection phrase. So not necessarily saying prior stuff was lies, but this is the truth as she remembers it now.
Exactly. It's standard legal language. It allows for past inconsistencies or memory fades while affirming the current testimony's honesty. It's asserting present clarity despite maybe past confusion or inaccuracies elsewhere.
Okay. Did they address the demand letters from her first lawyer? The ones with potentially different details?
Yes, they asked if she wrote them. She said no. And specifically about that detail, alleging Combs squeezed her breast, causing bruises. She flatly denied ever saying that, distancing herself from that specific claim found in the lawyer's letter.
Trying to isolate the problematic details as not coming directly from her?
Mm-hmm. And then they returned to the main event, the balcony incident. They asked her to demonstrate the alleged breast grabbing, and most crucially, they asked if there was any doubt in her mind that Mr. Combs held her off that balcony.
And her answer?
A clear, firm, no doubt.
So, ending on a strong, unambiguous note about the core allegation, trying to leave that certainty with the jury.
That's the goal of redirects, clarify, reinforce, and end strong.
And then the defense got one more quick shot. Recross.
Just briefly, confirmed she gave pictures of her leg injury with metadata to the government.
And they went back to the money motive one last time.
Yep. Asked her straight up. When you sued Mr. Combs, you weren't rich. I was not. You saw this as a chance to make $10 million true.
How did she respond to that direct accusation?
She denied lying, saying, I can't agree with you on that, and insisted she was here for justice.
But the defense immediately jumped on justice.
Yeah, asking if justice meant money, still pushing that financial motivation angle right to the very end.
Wow. That whole sequence with Bongolan really lays bare how cross-examination works. The defense uses every little perceived lack of precision, every apparent contradiction, every hint of motive to just create, well, unclarity, To sow doubt.
They absolutely scrutinize the precision of the words to argue they're unreliable. And the prosecution tries to bring back that precision, explain things away, often relying on best recollection or those definitive statements on the core issues. It's a constant tug of war over clarity.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Beyond the witness stand, there were also some important procedural things happening, right? Debates about evidence, courtroom rules.
Definitely. Before Jane Doe even testified, there was a significant argument about whether the press and publish should get to see her exhibits in real time.
This touches on that fundamental conflict. Transparency versus privacy. What was the government's concern?
They asked for the screens in the public gallery to be turned off because Jane Doe's exhibits, hundreds of pages, apparently were filled with highly personal information. Her real name, her child's name, phone number, address, nicknames, stuff you absolutely wouldn't want broadcast publicly.
Understandable, but the media objected.
Strongly. The Associated Press argued it was a First Amendment violation. The public's right to access court proceedings, especially in a major case like this.
Their point being, how can reporters cover the testimony accurately if they can't see the documents being discussed?
Exactly. They also pointed out that promises of getting redacted copies later weren't reliable. The government was apparently already behind on releasing previous exhibits. They argued that seeing things live is essential for genuine transparency.
Did the media propose a solution?
Yeah, they suggested the judge order the government to get the redactions done before Jane Doe testified, even if it meant shuffling witnesses around. Basically, put the onus on the prosecution to protect privacy up front while still allowing real-time access.
How did the prosecution respond to that?
Prosecutor Comey pushed back. Argued reporters aren't trained to handle sensitive info and she'd need to review everything first. She flatly rejected delaying things for redactions, saying something like, "No, I reject that the First Amendment does not require that the government is making accommodations." A clear stance that witness privacy trumped immediate, unredacted access for the press.
So the judge had to weigh those competing interests. Was there also a debate about one specific piece of evidence?
Yes, about a screenshot, a text message allegedly from Cassie Ventura to Christina Courtroom reading, "Cassie's dangles over the ledge." Oh my God, apparently referring to the Bongolan incident.
Prosecution wanted it in.
Argued it showed Combs' alleged violence and that Ventura was aware of coercion, connecting it to the indictment's themes.
And the defense
Objected. Mr. Shapiro argued it was backwards looking and, more importantly, lacked foundation. How did Ventura know? Did she see it? Did someone tell her? If she just heard it from someone else, it could be hearsay, irrelevant to Combs' actions or her direct knowledge. Again, challenging the precision of what the text actually proves.
How was that resolved? Did the text get admitted?
The source indicates the judge moved forward with bringing Bongolan and the jury back in after this discussion. So it might have been decided preliminarily, or maybe the debate was tabled or resolved in a way that allowed testimony to just proceed. The report wasn't entirely clear on the final ruling at that moment.
Okay. Which brings us to a moment of pretty high drama involving the defendant himself, the judge's warning to Sean Combs.
Yes, this was quite a moment. The judge basically threatened to kick Combs out of his own trial.
Why? What did he do?
The judge was apparently very explicit beforehand. No facial expressions, no nonverbal signals towards the jury. But he observed Combs nodding vigorously and looking at the jury during some questioning. And later, even during a sidebar discussion between the lawyers and judge, Combs was again seen looking at the jury.
Which is a huge no-no, trying to influence the jury outside the proper channels.
Absolutely unacceptable, as the judge put it. It compromises the whole process. So the judge called out his lawyer, Mr. Agnew, asked him point blank, "Will it happen again?" Agnew promised, "It will not, sir."
And the judge made the consequences clear.
Very clear. One more time, and he'd consider letting the government ask for a curative instruction, basically. The judge telling the jury to disregard the defendant's improper behavior, which is obviously bad for the defense.
And if it happened again after that?
Exclusion from the courtroom, getting kicked out of your own trial. An incredibly serious step.
So the judge's message to the lawyer was,
talk to your client. There should be no efforts whatsoever to have interactions with this jury.
Crystal clear. This ties right back to that precision theme, doesn't it? The judge demanded clarity in Combs' behavior, clear neutrality, clear non-engagement. His actions lacked that clarity, seeming like attempts to communicate improperly.
Exactly. The warning was a demand for precise, unambiguous adherence to courtroom conduct rules. Not just words, but actions.
And the source mentioned other stuff happening too. Jurors chatting, laughing, note passing. Combs may be making eye contact with specific jurors.
Yeah, observations about jurors chatting during sidebars, one smiling during cross-exam, notes being passed. And the reporter noting Combs seemed to be peeping out certain jurors, trying to make eye contact, maybe gauge reactions.
So the judge was likely sensitive to any potential interaction or influence, reinforcing that need for strict, clear boundaries for everyone.
It just shows how tightly controlled that environment needs to be, and how even small deviations can cause problems and require the judge to step in firmly.
Okay, so after all those procedural issues and wrapping up Bonglin's testimony, the court finally moved to Jane Doe.
Yes, a key witness, using a pseudonym for protection, as we discussed. And remember, the public gallery screens were off because her exhibits contain so much sensitive personal data. She's believed to be one of the alleged victims central to the SA and trafficking charges against Combs.
And the sheer volume of exhibits, hundreds of pages, texts, records, suggests they were aiming for a very detailed, precise case through her testimony.
It certainly seems that way. And before she even started her main testimony, they brought in another expert, Enrique Santos from the SDNY prosecutor's office, a specialist in cell phone data extraction.
Why, to validate digital evidence again.
Exactly. Specifically, evidence extracted from Cassie Ventura's iPhones that would likely relate to Jane Doe's testimony or the broader context. He mentioned having done over 3,000 extractions, establishing his expertise.
Did he validate that text message screenshot again, the dangles over the ledge one?
Yes, that specific exhibit was mentioned. The text bubble between Ventura and Christina Courtroom.
And the crucial part was the metadata.
Right. Santos confirmed the metadata showed the screenshot was captured on September 30th, 2016.
So just days after the alleged Bongle on balcony incident in September 2016.
Precisely. It doesn't prove the incident happened, but it does provide a timestamp showing when that conversation about it was documented via screenshot, lending some temporal support to the timeline. He also noted deleted messages can sometimes be recovered, showing the power of these forensic tools.
Okay. Then Jane Doe herself takes the stand. How did they start her testimony?
By establishing her background. Grew up in California, went to junior college, worked in modeling, and more recently as a social media content creator, advertising brands.
And she talked about her relationship with Combs.
Yes. Testified it lasted from 2021 to 2024, with a couple of breaks. Mentioned the nicknames they used, Sean, Baby, and she was Bert to his Ernie. Little personal details.
How did they meet?
Miami, 2020. She was on a trip with girlfriends. He was actually dating one of her friends at the time. She described him initially as really funny and nice, larger than life. Met him at a yacht party. He gave her his number.
And she mentioned seeing drugs right away.
Yes, that first night, at a place called Two Star, a studio or club, saw a man with pink powder. Her girlfriend got upset, thinking she was interested in Sean, and they left suddenly. So, drugs were present in his circle from her very first encounter.
How did their actual relationship start then, if he was dating her friend?
She said he pursued her via text. I'd like to take you out. Call me Ernie. She hesitated initially because of the friend, but felt okay proceeding after that friend got engaged and moved. She even mentioned the friend had apparently been seeing both Combs and her fiancé simultaneously.
Okay, and their first date.
Miami, January 2021. He got a hotel room. She described meeting him there, again saying he was larger than life, immediate deep conversation, and they made lots of love. Then a more proper date at a restaurant the next day, more mellow one-on-one.
And that first date lasted 5 days.
5 days. So clearly an intense, immediate connection from her perspective.
Did she share personal things with him early on?
Yes. Told him she dated someone he knew, that her child's father didn't like Sean. He supposedly said he didn't mind. Told him she had one child. He, in turn, told her his relationship with her friend wasn't real. She felt head over heels flying back. They kept texting, started traveling together.
Where did they travel?
First trip mentioned was Turks and Caicos, February 2021, for 9 days. Then the Bahamas for 6 days. She mentioned who else was around Christina Coram, staff like a chef, butler, sometimes a barber, painting that picture of his lifestyle. And this is where the testimony about money and drugs becomes more consistent. He gave her gifts, like a love bracelet. Then $10,000 cash because he'd taken her away for so long, which she said she really appreciated. Later wired another $10,000, showing financial support early on.
And the drugs during these trips?
She testified about using ecstasy in Turks, said she'd used it before but claimed he suggested it repeatedly, like 10 times in the pool, then gave her a pill saying it would be fun.
Did she describe the experience?
Yes. Initially a bad reaction, falling, maybe screaming, being put in the shower. But after a smaller dose, she felt relaxed, euphoric, sexual, enhanced touch and sense, loving and flirtatious. Described the come-down as her mind readjusting, feeling tired. Said she used ecstasy again in the Bahamas and he gave it to her there too.
So alleging he wasn't just using drugs around her, but actively providing them and suggesting their use.
That seems to be the implication of her testimony. She also mentioned they started using the L word, love, suggesting emotional connection. But he also told her he was seeing other women.
And she was okay with that.
She testified she was, because she liked him and felt she didn't really have the option of monogamy, which could suggest acceptance or maybe a feeling of powerlessness in setting terms.
So the relationship continued, with breaks, until his arrest. She moved to LA.
Yes, Feb to May 2021. He gave her $6,000 for the trip. Said she saw him about every other week. He continued giving her money here and there, cash or wires, including one payment of $20,000, documenting that ongoing financial tie.
And the drug use continued.
Constantly, according to her testimony, every time I saw Sean, she listed ecstasy, Molly, cocaine, coina, and ketamine, K, described effects. Molly made her horny, enhanced sex. Cocaine made her alert. Ketamine she didn't like, felt like walls closing in.
And she linked the drug use to specific situations.
Yes, explicitly stated it happened when we were having sex sex. That's a potentially crucial link for the prosecution, suggesting drugs were part of the sexual environment, possibly influencing consent or coercion.
She also described learning his preferences.
Explicit videos playing, lingerie, high-end stripper shoes, lots of baby oil, usually in bedrooms, often with red lighting. Interestingly, she said initially she loved them.
Loved them. That's an interesting detail, suggesting initial enjoyment or participation.
It could suggest that, yes, an initial acceptance or perhaps even excitement before, according to her testimony, things took a turn.
And she described that turning point.
Yes, an incident in May 2021. They were watching explicit videos, having fantasy conversations. Her voice reportedly cracked here, showing emotion, but she declined a break. Said she'd been awake 24 hours, had taken ecstasy and Molly.
What happened then?
He said, "I can make it happen." She thought he was just playing into the fantasy. But then she saw him looking serious on his phone and he repeated, "I can make it happen tonight."
And her reaction?
Tonight, then. She testified this was the moment the relationship devolved into darker fantasy SCX, a perceived shift to something negative.
Did she give a specific example of these darker encounters?
Yes, she described one incident in detail. A hotel suite, red lights being set up by an assistant. Combs told her, "There's someone coming, he knows the guy." She felt super nervous, thinking it was the fantasy becoming real.
Who arrived?
A man she identified as Don, an entertainer. She described the scene. She's on the couch in a robe, nervous. Combs tells her to stand up. She dances. Don is in his underwear. Sean is apparently touching himself, but being encouraging and sweet to her.
How did she feel during this?
She testified she felt anxious, wanted to get it done, started crying, asked for a condom, but Sean allegedly said the guys get tested. Eventually, Don left, and then she and Sean made love.
What about afterwards? Her feelings then?
A complex mix, according to her testimony. Exhilarated, taboo, had a good time with my partner. But she also thought she wouldn't do it again, maybe just a few times, as something forbidden.
So not purely negative immediately after.
Apparently not, based on her description. But she testified this incident opened up Pandora's box. It then became too much of it afterwards, happening all the time. She said she went along later, suggesting compliance replaced that initial complex reaction.
And did she say whether she ever objected?
Crucially, yes. Testified she told him she didn't want to do this many times, either in writing or verbally, directly addressing the consent issue.
And she linked her refusals to rent money.
Yes. Testified that when she said she didn't want to have sex with other men, his response would be offering maybe 3 times more a month for rent.
Offering more money when she said no.
That's what she alleged. Said it made her feel frustrated and obligated. After a sidebar, she directly confirmed that between 2023 and his arrest, he paid her rent, and this made her feel obligated to have sex with other men.
That's a very direct link between finances and alleged sexual coercion, key for the prosecution.
Absolutely. She said they called these nights debauchery or hotel nights, claimed they happened often, almost every time she saw him. Said even normal time together always felt like a hotel night afterwards, suggesting how pervasive it became.
Did she have any say in when these happened?
No, she testified. Sean decided, often on short notice. She had to keep childcare ready, felt pressure to always be put together, hair, nails, tan, because he wanted to be beautiful, specifically for these events. Suggests a high degree of control over her time and appearance.
Were there other restrictions on her life?
She mentioned stopping going out with friends after mid-2022, said he got angry, sent voice notes when she went to France with friends in summer 2021, also alleged he tried to control her appearance for sex, wanting straight hair, ponytails, wanting her to get nipple piercings, all painting a picture of increasing control.
What about her own income during this time?
She earned some from social media, but said it went down because she was focusing on Sean. He gave her money, here and there, including that $20,000 payment.
Did she ever try to become financially independent?
Yes. Testified she told him she wanted to make her own money, suggesting OnlyFans. His reaction, hesitant energy, and a direct no.
Why did she feel she needed his approval for that?
She explained, felt like he was my boyfriend. Underscores her view of the relationship dynamic and his perceived influence, even over her potential career.
Which brings us back to the rent. This seems like a central piece of evidence for the prosecution's financial control argument.
It appears so. A sealed exhibit, likely her lease from April 2023, was shown. Rent, $10,000 a month. The term love contract came up, described by her as a flirty thing initially.
Was there a negotiation?
Yes, over an allowance. She wanted $15K, he apparently countered with $10,000. She explained she wanted the money for a beautiful home for balance in their chaotic relationship. So he agreed to pay the $10K rent directly instead of an allowance.
So the rent payment replaced a direct allowance she was asking for.
That's how she framed it. And evidence of the payment was shown in email from Combs' accountant to her and her landlord. This echoes that earlier mention of Diddy allegedly telling someone else he'd pay rent for loyalty after wild nights and telling his accountant, don't do anything stupid. The prosecution is likely presenting this as a consistent pattern.
Using rent as leverage or reward?
Okay. Were there more details about the hotel nights themselves?
Wow.
Logistics handled by his travel agent, Jess, or KK. Descriptions of the suites. Red lights, sheets everywhere. And that detail about excessive use of baby oil, 24 bottles or more per night. Specific, memorable details.
Did these only happen in hotels?
No, she testified one hotel night even happened in her own apartment. She wore lingerie, the high stripper shoes, suggests it wasn't just confined to external locations.
And her actions during these?
Greeting the entertainer, being on drugs, Sean telling her to touch herself. Then sex with the entertainer, specifically clarified as oral sex. Afterwards, being with Sean. Said she didn't clean up afterward. Estimated duration, 20 to 30 hours. Prolonged events.
Wow, okay. And what about Combs' reaction in the courtroom while she was testifying to all this?
The reporter noted he initially sat back, legs crossed, hands in lap, listening intently with very little reaction, trying to maintain that neutral demeanor, perhaps.
But that changed.
Apparently, yes. The observation was that he periodically looked over his shoulder towards the jury, especially when Jane described specific things like the large cash payments or her bad reaction to ecstasy.
Despite the judge's clear warning earlier.
Yes, the reporter even mentioned the judge's warning again. Stop, play with his fingers and just look down. The speculation was that Combs just couldn't help himself, wanting to see how the jurors who hold his fate were reacting to this testimony.
That tension between needing to appear neutral and wanting to gauge the jury must be immense. Even glancing back breaks that rule of non-interaction.
It highlights how difficult it is to maintain that perfect courtroom composure under such intense pressure and scrutiny, especially when such damaging testimony is being presented.
So Jane Doe's testimony overall, it sounds incredibly detailed. Dates, places, money, drugs, names, quotes, even nicknames and terms like hotel nights.
The level of specific detail is striking. It's clearly a strategy. Providing that granularity aims to build credibility, making the account seem vivid, real, and potentially verifiable through the accompanying exhibits, the texts, the emails, the lease, the wire transfers.
And that level of precision stands in contrast to some of the challenges Bungalow faced with memory gaps or inconsistencies, right?
Structurally, yes. Jane Doe's account, despite clear emotional moments, is presented as this very precise, specific narrative. It's designed to paint a clear, unambiguous picture for the jury, one the prosecution hopes they will find entirely credible. The sheer volume of detail is part of the argument for its truthfulness.
It really drives home how that kind of specific clarity, backed by evidence, is such a powerful tool in trying to build a convincing case in court.
It absolutely is. It's about providing a narrative that feels solid, detailed, and resistant to claims of vagueness or fabrication.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today, really digging into the layers of these trial proceedings. We've seen just how tough it can be for witnesses under cross-examination, how every single word, every detail gets put under the microscope for its precision.
And we looked at those crucial background battles, the legal arguments over evidence access, balancing transparency and privacy, and that stark warning from the judge about the need for clear, proper conduct in the courtroom itself.
And then, of course, the detailed and frankly disturbing story told by Jane Doe, backed up by what seems like a significant amount of digital and financial evidence, all aimed at giving the jury this very specific, clear picture.
And through it all, that theme of precision just keeps coming up, doesn't it? The precision of testimony, the clarity of memory, the clear presentation of evidence, and even the need for clear, unambiguous behavior in court.
While the defense often works to introduce unclarity, pointing out contradictions, questioning motives, challenging timelines, all to create that reasonable doubt, the prosecution fights back, striving for precision through detail, evidence, and witness assertions.
It really makes you think about the whole process. We live in a world overflowing with messy information, but the courtroom demands this intense, almost surgical precision. We saw today how every single word, date, action, even a glance towards the jury, is scrutinized.
It leaves you with a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? How much can the perceived precision or the lack of it in all these details truly sway the scales of justice when so much is at stake for everyone involved?
Something definitely worth reflecting on.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive today. We hope exploring these complexities has given you a clearer view of everything unfolding.